talk about uniforms in general and Mets uniforms in particular. And so we're going to start with a question for the whole panel, and I'm also going to ask you guys, I want to engage the audience as much as possible today. What do we think of the Mets uniform changes for the upcoming 2015 season? Starting with changing the pinstripes from cream to white. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Changing the pinstripes from cream to white. Yes. Everybody likes that. All right, in the audience, who thinks that's a thumbs up? And who does not like changing it? Just one or two people. All right, so everybody pretty much likes changing the pinstripes from cream to white. Second change, adding a new alternate road cap. Is anyone here wearing the new? This gentleman here, come on up. Come on up. Stand up here and face the audience. Don't face me. And this is the new alternate road cap, which has the gray NY. First from the panel, thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm giving it a neither.
It's a nice,
huh?
I don't care. Hat.
You don't care.
I'd rather it be white. It's a nice hat.
All right. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Everyone on the panel. All right, in the audience, thumbs up.
Why?
And wait, one at a time. Thumbs up.
It's not a nice hat. I like tradition.
And thumbs down. All right, not a popular choice with most of the people here. I have to say I don't like it either. You can sit down. Yeah, we're done with you. And the third change the Mets are doing this year, scrapping the Snow White jersey. First, one at a time, one at a time. First from the panel, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Two thumbs down. I like them.
I like them.
We're in agreement.
Wait, you like so you're down on the change?
I'm down on the change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who in the audience is in favor of scrapping the Snow White jersey? And who is opposed? Who does not like scrapping the? And who doesn't really care? It seems like a fair. Okay, there's sort of mixed reaction to that one. Huh? Okay. All right. Someone in the front row thinks they wore them too much. Let's not have too much front row chatter now. All right. Well, now we'll have more audience participation questions, but now I want to talk to some of our panelists about their area of specialty. So Bill and Nick, you are both experts on game-used uniforms. What types of things do you see on Mets gamers that you don't see on other teams' gamers? And are there certain things that typically characterize a counterfeit Mets gamer? Like, what do you look for to say, like, oh, that's not legit, that's a counterfeit?
I can start here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm pretty well known in the game-used area. A lot of collectors approach me via email or phone before they're about to make a purchase, because they're wondering what Paul's asked, how do we know this is legitimate? And this also is part of what Bill does. One of his sections on each chapter deal with who manufactured every jersey style. And as you're all aware, Mets jerseys, you're probably in the triple digits now of the number of different styles they wore since '62. If you start counting batting practices, alternates, special event jerseys. So knowing who did each jersey is definitely part of it. Knowing what the tagging looks like. Retail tagging versus game use tagging is completely different. And now it's taken on a whole new level with Majestic. They even barcode tag their jerseys now in 2 different places. So it's kind of easy to tell today, but way
Nick,
back
what do you mean
it
when you say retail versus authentic tagging is different? Can you give an example?
Okay, so very easy example.
Maybe from the jerseys you two gentlemen are wearing.
Well, one of the things, and again, going back through a period of time, retail jerseys always had a little tag in the back of the neck. The players generally don't. The players had a little tiny tag below the jock tag in the front. It's gotten simpler, actually, because there's less diversity. One company makes everything. If you go back in time, 10 years, 15, 20 years or more, they oftentimes had multiple sets that were made by multiple companies in the same year. So you could tell by looking at somebody on television what brand of jersey they were wearing by what style of numbers they had on the back. And there's a lot of mismatching that goes on especially since what happened for so many years is the game wasn't the moneymaker that it is today. And game-worn stuff would go to the minors. It would have the players' names stripped off, sometimes the numbers, and for some clubs, not generally the Mets, but for some clubs, they'd even strip off the crest on the front and sew new things on. So when they would come back, all that would be left would be probably somebody's name and a tag in the collar, and then it would be recreated from that. And it's so easy to get it completely wrong. I think probably the biggest indiscretions is people selling minor league jerseys as major league game worn when they're not. And I've stopped visiting the forums because I've gotten into more arguments about things like that than is worth it in life.
Yeah, I'll give you one example of something that came my way recently. An auction house, which I won't mention their names, was selling a 83 rookie Darryl Strawberry Mets jersey. And naturally, collectors got in touch with me and said, wow, this is a great jersey to own, being a Mets fan of the 80s, Darryl Strawberry, his rookie year. And the one thing that stood out was the team tagging on it stated it was an 82 jersey. Now, like what Bill said, anything from that era was stripped and recycled to the minors. So they would take the nameplates off, and the minor league teams, which all of the road jerseys, if you notice back then, said Mets on it, not New York like they do today. All of the Mets farm teams were all called the Mets. They had the Jackson Mets, Lynchburg,
Tidewater,
Pittsfield Mets. You had tons of different, and even the instructional league teams were all the Mets as well. So it wasn't uncommon for them to just wear those jerseys that were once major league jerseys with the number on the back without the names. So now, years later, these jerseys are now on the market because the teams have sold them off, and they come into collectors' hands and they say, "Oh, this is great, number 18." Send them out to a customizer and say, "Put Darryl Strawberry on the back," and try to recreate it as authentic as possible to what it looked like years ago. The trouble is, we were dealing with a 1982 jersey, which was also a set 1. So these were jerseys that were actually made at the start of the season, and if anybody knows their Mets history, 1982, number 18 was Joel Youngblood, and he would have won the set 1 jersey at the start of the year. Now, kind of funny, another thing you look for on these old jerseys is the shape of the nameplate that was removed, because they leave an outline of the stitch holes. Now, Youngblood being 10 letters long, coincidentally, Strawberry is also 10 letters long. So one might think, hey, this could have been Joel Youngblood's jersey, but later down the track was recreated as Strawberry. So these are kind of the things that you tend to look for, and they're not obvious to the non-collector.
One thing I just point to, too, and I know everybody can't see, but I'm just pointing to this fact, the tagging for each year or for periods of time changes, the wash tag instructions. There's all sorts of things that change depending on what year it's made. So if you look at it and you really know what you're looking at, you can tell if it really is from the year in question. One of the challenges about writing a reference book is that people also use it to create counterfeits. It's one of the things that have mixed feelings about, because essentially I'm telling somebody who really wants to create something that's convincingly fake exactly what mistakes to avoid. But it's true. That's true in almost in any business. I'd comment, well, you talk to people who are buying things and want to know if it's real. I stay out of those conversations because everybody wants it to be real. And whenever you tell them it's probably not, there's always somebody who's really angry, either the person who just bought it, the person who's selling it. So I kind of keep as a researcher and stay back from that.
As you can see, I avoid all this by not wearing jerseys.
I see that.
Yeah. So, Russ, you deal with all the stitching of the stuff, with the tags and all the rest, and patches also. You're very involved with patches. You don't just sew the patches on. You and your shop have actually designed many of the patches that the Mets have worn.
Did it myself.
You personally. Now, last season, the Mets wore a Frank Cashion memorial patch, and tell me the story behind that.
Well, just to backtrack real quick, the first patch I did for the Mets was for John McSherry, the umpire, when he died during the opening game, I think it was Cincinnati. So then they were coming.
1996.
Right. So I created the patch. He was a home plate only. He was at home plate when he died. So I created the home plate with the bats, and we put in the middle JM number 10. That was his number. And then when Brian Cole died, I created that patch. It was just a round ball with his number in the middle.
Well, that was the combined patch with Tommy Agee, right?
Tommy Agee, correct.
That was worn only for opening day of 2001, I believe.
I don't remember the date.
I have it.
And then I did, right after 9/11, the Mets brought me Bobby Valentine's jersey, asked me to come up with a couple of different designs. I did 3 of them on one jersey. They ultimately went with one of them, and then I did it on every uniform. That jersey I have hanging in my shop, so if anyone's around Whitestone and wants to come up, you can see that one.
And that design, that's the date 9/11/01 with the American flag
Right.
flanking it.
And then when they came back after 9/11, Mike Piazza, I made him a special patch that went on his chest protector. There's only 2 in existence. One was on the chest protector, and another one I made for myself, which I have on a picture that he signed for me. So I have that in my shop too. I did the Tug Mcgraw patch. I made the Bob Murphy patch. I didn't do the.
Now wait a minute, the Tug Mcgraw patch.
Well, that just said Tug. You
I
gotta
remember
believe.
I visited you. It was in 2003. I went. It was the first time I met you, and it was somebody in your shop. He said he did it, and I asked him, "Oh yeah, what did that entail?" And you said it entailed typing TUG into the computer.
Well, that's the guy that works for me that actually put it on the machine, but I designed it. That was a simple one. I did not do the Ralph Kiner patch. They just, pretty much like Bob Murphy, they took that little microphone and made it into a patch. Now the Frank Cashion patch, this is a quick story. I was actually, I try in the summer to get out one day a week to golf. And for those of you who golf, you can't really golf unless you have a clear head. Well, that particular day, Frank Cashion died the night before. And sure enough, it was like the second hole. I get a text message from Kevin Kears. They want to make a patch for Frank Cashion.
Kevin is the Mets equipment manager.
I got about 12 texts from him. Totally ruined my golf game for that day. Forget it. But anyway, I said to him, okay, no problem. He was known as the bow tie, so let me make a bow tie, and in this part of the bow of the tie we'll put an F, and in this part a C. And I created the sample. The next morning I had the sample for them, and they came back and said, we didn't have enough time. They just got some company to do it real quick. It was just a square that said FC in it. So they didn't do the bow tie, which I thought they should have.
You know, a lot of people, I'm not saying anyone ripped off your idea or that you ripped off anyone else's. A lot of people had that idea because the day he died, people were emailing me and saying, oh, wouldn't this be the perfect memorial patch design for Frank Cashion? And they were sending me these assorted, at least 3 different people sent me, we posted some on the site, didn't we, Phil, of bow tie designs. And so I think you were definitely on the track, the right track. What they went with, was dignified and fine, but it didn't have any character.
Right, it was just a rectangle, black rectangle, white FC, and that was it.
And so when something like that happens, and like Kevin Kirst is asking you, like, hey, can you, whip something up?
I was like, thanks for ruining my golf game yesterday. Nice rectangle.
Yeah, right. And does he then say, oh, we're sorry?
No, not at all.
For Mets collectors, what Russ does is really neat because you're, I think, the only one who does the direct embroidery for like the Tug Mcgraw patch and the McSherry patch is direct embroidered, the 9/11.
Right in.
And it's sewn right into the sleeve
it's sewn
rather
right
than
into the
rather
sleeve,
than a
so you
separate
can't
patch
fake
that's
it
applied
unless
to
you
the
have,
sleeve.
a big embroidery machine or something, which people
Well, the
have.
year with McSherry, after the umpires saw what I did, every umpiring crew that came in, I did it for them. So by the time,
for their jerseys.
Yeah, for the umpires.
So did you, since they're wearing a dark jersey, did you do it in white?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
So by the time half the season was over, every umpire had it.
Now there's another memorial patch in Mets history, and I know Nick knows this story, and you can tell us about it too. Apparently there was aside from the Bob Murphy memorial that the Mets did wear, which was basically just the letters Bob Murphy outlining the Skyline logo patch, right? There was another patch that had been planned. Is that right?
Well, Nick could tell the story because he called me up and he came across some jerseys that had a different Bob Murphy logo on it, which I did. And we were discussing it earlier, and probably what the Mets did, instead of making new uniforms they didn't want to get rid of the uniforms that I already put that Bob Murphy logo in. So what they did was they covered it up with a patch.
Yeah, there's actually on a set of jerseys there, the 2004 alternate black roads, there are rectangular material patches covering the original embroidery for Bob Murphy, which would have been a much nicer patch. I don't know if any of you saw the article I put on Mets Police this past year, but I gave Russ a couple of calls and we were talking about the history. How did that evolve? I eventually wound up with a jersey in my collection, John Franco's 2004 Black Road, which had that phantom patch underneath the black material. And I didn't want to alter what I feel is history in the jersey and remove the patch, but if you lift up underneath and look underneath the jersey from the inside, you can see that it would have really been a beautiful patch.
Can you describe it, Nick? What did it look like?
Well, it was a curved word Murphy and underneath a microphone, which was a hell of a lot more character than just the words Bob Murphy.
Which is what they eventually wore, what they actually wore.
If you've ever taken a look in the Mets Museum this past year, that Franco jersey was in fact hanging. But if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll very easily miss that because they literally covered up the patch.
That's just the one.
Yeah, Bill's showing you what they actually did go with.
And so, Russ, you didn't design the one with the microphone.
I did.
Oh, you did, but they just didn't use. They ended up
Right.
not using it. So
Right.
there's another case where you did something with more character, and they ended up going with something a little plainer.
Right.
All right. So they clearly they don't appreciate your genius. Let's talk to Phil. Phil, you do something that I know other fans do. Maybe some fans here in the room do it. You track the Mets record by uniform, and so you can tell us for a given season or over a series of seasons what the Mets record is in any given uniform combination. Now, obviously, every team doesn't fare as well on the road, so your team's record in road grays is not going to be as good. But tell us some things that stick out in terms of the Mets record. And let me ask the audience here, are we all sounding okay? Can everyone hear us? Everybody good? Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be loud. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I still do it the old school way. I've only been tracking them since 2009, since they moved into this building. But I do it literally by taking a steno pad and writing the combination of the date, the uniform they wore, the cap, win-loss, day of the week, and I look for patterns because I'm a lunatic.
We're not nuts at all.
No, but anyway, and 2009 and 10 and 11, they had the blacks and they had the grays. I know a lot of people can't see this. They had the pinstripes, and they had the two caps. They had actually three caps. They had the solid black cap. They had the hybrid cap, the black with the blue bill, and then the regular blue cap. The only year I didn't do any tracking for was 2012 when they went back to the 50-year anniversary where they just had the pinstripes, the snow whites, and the grays, and that's the only year I didn't track. I figured, hey, they're done with all of this uniform shenanigans. Boy, was I wrong. But if you ask me, well, how did they do in the snow white with the blue cap in 2009? Well, they went 18 and 11, so they did pretty well in that. But unfortunately, most years they don't have a winning record in any of their combinations. The one thing that stood out though in 2009, they wore the black jersey and the black cap, and they of course had the best record. It's jersey. I know Paul and a lot of us here hate them. There was the whole "Ditch the Black" campaign, which Paul and Shannon were big fans of, and of course they had the best record in that. But they did wear. I don't know if anybody remembers this. There was one series against the Giants in the middle of the season where they broke out these wonderful things with the big giant. Right there, the cream NY, and I mentioned that if only because it was 09. Trust me. That was the other thing which nobody could see. Does anybody remember what happened that series? So it's an unlucky, to me, jersey. But of course, they would recycle the cream, bringing it back, for the pinstripe uniform a couple of years later. And then I go through the years, but nothing really stood out in 2010 except that they wore that black jersey and cap. They only wore it 8 times at home, but they started out 6-0, so that was a lucky uniform. It's like, why didn't they keep wearing it? Just didn't do it. 2011, again, I had a million combinations, but that's when they came back with that was the first one where they had the Los Mets in the royal blue. They were still wearing the black uniforms then, and that became the basis for what became the 2013 alternate. So we're seeing a little pattern here. They wore the cream became a uniform. They wore the Los Mets, and that was also a year that they wore, the one time they ever wore it, as far as I know, the batting practice jersey. And Paul and I have to actually be at that game. It was a doubleheader with the Marlins. Anybody got the jersey? They wore that for one game with the black cap. They had never worn a batting practice jersey in a game before. And then 12, as I said, they dumped all of the crap. They went with the Los Mets, but they wore white instead of the orange that they had the year before, so that was a little bit of an anomaly. We moved to 2013 when they got the blue, which a lot of you like. I don't happen to like it. And a million different combinations then, because they introduced the hybrid cap with the orange bill. And again, I can tell you, the only uniform they did really terribly in that year was the Royal Home when they wore a blue cap. They actually sometimes wore the hybrid cap and they wore the blue. They went 1-5, and they actually stopped wearing that, and I don't think they've ever worn that since. I don't think they wore that in 14 at all. And that was then again the year, and if you know where I'm going with they broke out they wore the orange Los Mets. So will we see an orange jersey next year? I don't know. Cream, 2 years later we got a cream. Blue, 2 years later we got a blue. Do we get an orange next year?
Let me ask the audience. With this kind of data available, that a team performs well in this uniform combination, poorly in another combination, should that be taken into account? Does a uniform affect performance? Does anybody think that the team should tailor its uniform to its past performance in various combinations? No. Only in the playoffs, somebody said. Okay. I think, yeah. So what about from a superstition standpoint? Does anyone believe in that kind of as a superstitious thing? Maybe. A placebo effect. Okay. All right, we're going to go to a few what I call lightning round questions now. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to ask everybody on the panel one at a time to answer. Don't give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down all at once. Just one at a time, starting with Todd and down the line, and then I'll ask you guys. Question 1 for the lightning round. The Mets have used essentially the same chest script on their jersey for the team's entire existence. A few minor tweaks here and there, but essentially the same chest script. Is it time to think about changing that and going with a different chest format, a different design, yes or no? Todd?
No.
Nick?
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
In the audience, anybody say yes? Does anyone say yes? Everyone says no. Stick with the script. The correct answer, of course, is no. It is a classic design that has stood the test of time and should be stuck with. I'm glad to see everybody agrees. Lightning round, question 2. When Keith Hernandez and Gary Carter were Mets co-captains, Hernandez wore the C on his jersey, but Carter did not. Maybe because he thought the C would stand for catcher or Carter, or he just didn't want that. Later, when John Franco was captain, he did wear the C. David Wright is now the captain. He does not wear a C. But should he wear a C on his jersey? Down the line, starting with Todd.
No.
No.
I say no.
It's a hockey thing, no.
Yeah, there you go.
No.
Doesn't matter.
It would be more work for you. You'd have to
More money too. That's why I like the black uniforms, because it's 3-color lettering.
Oh, so it was more money. Who in the audience, who thinks David Wright should wear the C? On the cap, a C on the cap. Interesting. That would be a Major League Baseball first.
Batting helmet too?
Who says no? Who doesn't care? Who didn't know that David Wright was the captain? Okay. All right, not a lot of support for the C. The correct answer, of course, is that a captain should have dignity and not flaunt his captaincy. So just like Derek Jeter did, and we all hate Derek Jeter because he's a hated Yankee, but that was one thing, didn't wear the C. Lightning rounds. We're going to stay with David Wright. Everyone on the Mets wears a blue undershirt, except for David Wright, who for some reason is allowed to wear an orange undershirt. Is that John Franco had his reasons, and that was a long time ago. Is that an endearing quirk, or should David Wright get with the program like everybody else? Todd.
Wonderfully endearing quirk.
It's an undershirt. Let it be.
I prefer orange undershirt.
Yeah, I don't care.
I think she should wear blue.
I think everyone should wear the same.
Audience, who thinks it's okay or thinks it's even better than okay that David Wright wears the orange undershirt? Who thinks David Wright should wear blue like everybody else?
Well, would it be okay if the 25th man
Conformists.
on the roster wore a different color?
Right. The right answer, of course, is that a uniform should be uniform, and that David Wright should wear blue like everybody else.
Someone said that if he wore green, he'd hit 30.
Actually,
homes
the correct answer is David Wright can wear anything he wants if he hits more than 8 home runs next year.
There you go. That's what you get.
We're going to have another question about orange versus blue, not about David Wright's undershirt. For the first 33 years of the Mets' existence, the team's squatchy, which is the little button on top of the cap, was blue. You had a blue hat with a blue button. But then in 1995, the squatchy changed to orange. Should the squatchy stay orange, or should it go back to blue? Is anyone here wearing a cap with a blue squatchy? Terrence Kern's in the back with a blue squatchy cap.
Old school.
And almost everyone else here has a blue cap with an orange squatchy. And so, down the line, Todd Radham, should the squatchy stay blue, or should it stay orange or go back to blue?
Orange, beautiful little detail.
I like traditional blue.
I don't care, but if I had to guess, I'd say orange is okay with me.
Bill Henderson doesn't care about caps. He only cares about jerseys.
I don't do
He's
hats.
a true specialist.
Orange is okay, but I prefer blue. They're going to go with one.
I like the orange.
I like the orange too.
In the audience, do we prefer start with people who want to keep it as orange? People who think it should go back to blue? Pretty evenly split. In this case, one interesting thing to note is that throughout most of Major League Baseball, the color of the squatchy matches the color of the brim. There are some exceptions. Dodgers have a white squatchy without a white brim, but in general, color of the squatchy matches the color of the brim. As long as the Mets have a solid blue cap, should be a blue squatchy. That's the right answer.
Well, I don't, however, like on the batting helmet to have a contrasting color little sticky.
Now the Mets are one of the few teams. Well, other teams do it too. They have a contrasting decal to mimic the squatchy on their batting helmets. Many teams do have that. Yeah. Another lightning round question. I think this one may be more controversial. For a while there, the color black was a major part of the Mets color scheme. There were black jerseys, black caps, black drop shadows on all the letters and numbers, which gave Russ more money, and so on. But now we have been black free for 3 seasons. So with the benefit of hindsight, I ask everybody, do you look back at the black with nostalgic fondness, or do you say good riddance?
Too soon to tell, but probably not nostalgic fondness.
I think we should wear it maybe on a very rare occasion to celebrate a past player like Mike Piazza.
I think it will be looked at with some nostalgia. It's really hard to tell nostalgia in the year you're in, or even 20 years.
The cycle for that kind of thing has shrunk and shrunk. Nostalgia now can be like yesterday.
Yeah, I think it will be remembered fondly by a generation, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. 1999, 2000, good years to remember as a fan. But what bothers me about the Mets is that they really haven't learned their lesson, right? They going out with the awful camo jerseys now. This is the same idea, kind of chasing a trend that doesn't belong to them, and it's sad.
Mets in black.
Yeah, these guys basically stole what I was going to say, but I think there are a generation of fans who, for them, it was 99 and 2000, and they fondly remember the black. And if you look back at the 2000 World Series against that other team from the Bronx, Mets, I think the only game they won, they were wearing the black tops. So I'm sure there's some fondness for it. I hate it, never liked it. I know you never liked it, but yeah, there's going to be some nostalgia there.
It seems like the guys on the panel and you guys all out there, when it comes to baseball, tradition is a big thing. But back then, when the blacks came out, it was more about fashion and about selling uniforms.
Right.
I'm sort of traditionalist too. I like the blue and the white. But back then, the black was a nice looking jersey. I don't know if it was proper to wear during the games, but it was a nice jersey.
All right, in the audience, who misses the black or at least has fond nostalgic feelings about the black? And who says good riddance, never wants to see the black ever again? Relatively evenly split. The correct answer, of course, is that the second verse of Meet the Mets says the fans are true to the orange and blue, and there is no mention of black.
That's right.
Nor should there be any use of black in the Mets color scheme. All right, we'll have more lightning round questions, but now I want to turn it over to Todd, and I want to ask you, Todd, as a professional uniform designer, where do you see Major League Baseball uniform designs trending at the moment, and how do you see the Mets fitting into that? Are they in the mainstream of where the sport is heading? If they're not, does that even matter? Because should a team essentially stay true to its own visual heritage and really not worry about what other teams are doing? Give us sort of the big picture and how the Mets fit into the big picture.
All right, well, big picture, I think you're going to have this inevitable movement that's influenced by college football in that you're going to see more and more jerseys, and we have been. And I think I had mentioned earlier, the Milwaukee Brewers 2 years ago wore 13 different jerseys. Now, does that extrapolate to 162 games, 162 different jerseys? I don't think so, but we're going to see more one-off patches to celebrate single days, things of that nature. Question 2, as far as the Mets are concerned, personally, I think the Mets are in kind of a sweet spot right now. They kind of came back to their roots. The Mets own orange and blue in the National League, right? It's a very signature look, and it has been for over half a century. So after 15 years of wandering in the wilderness and going toward black, whatever it is, to come back to that core piece of their visual DNA, I think resonates. And I think one other important thing has happened in the last couple of years. Mr. Met, having migrated to the uniform for the first time ever, only a few years ago, I think it's a great thing because Mr. Met is also a signature visual piece of this franchise. No one else can own that, so I think it's a great thing.
The Mets, of course, have a batting practice cap now with Mr. Met, and we've seen Mr. Met's counterpart, Mr. Red or Mr. Redlegs, used more and more by the Reds.
Right.
Can you see a time, and I'm not asking, you may actually be privy to this, I'm not asking you to divulge anything confidential, but could you envision a time when the Mets would actually wear a game cap, not a batting practice cap, that featured Mr. Met?
I think that's kind of it's a very slippery slope because you're seeing this trend in the last few years toward New Era saying to MLB, we would like clubs to wear their BP hats in games.
Yes.
Or Majestic saying, we're going to have a camouflage day, and you're seeing the New York Yankees, the most traditional visual franchise in the game, and most traditional in so many other ways, going out in camo NYs, if not the whole thing being camo, okay? So, the tail wags the dog. Whether or not that happens as a permanent thing, I don't know. But there seems to be this kind of mixing and matching movement with regard to the Mets. That little bit of an outline against the NY, it's not a seismic change by the standards of most franchises.
Wait, you're referring to the new road cap?
Yes, exactly. So it may happen, but I don't know if that becomes a permanent thing. I really can't see it happening. The NY is the hallmark of the Mets franchise for over 50 seasons.
A little applause for the NY there. Now, you talked about how baseball could become more like college football, but if by the standards of baseball, we see lots more jerseys. Baseball is still by far the most traditional-looking sport, has tinkered with its look, I think, a lot less than the other sports. Do you see that continuing, or do you think that's going to, that we're going to get more into the realm of what I call superhero costumes, which is what we see in most of the other sports?
Well, I mean, we talk about this all the time. The essential baseball uniform of the 21st century to this point is really pretty identical to the essential baseball uniform of the post-World War II era. The cut is different, but it's a button jersey. It is a baseball cap. It's not a high thing, right? Socks have come and gone, this kind of a thing. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I really don't.
I was, just to kind of second what Todd's saying there, I was talking to a branding consultant, a sports branding consultant, just yesterday, and I asked him, do you see Nike or Under Armour or Adidas trying to muscle into the Major League uniform contract when Majestic, because Majestic is really more like one of the old legacy sportswear companies like Wilson or Spalding, or they don't make equipment or gloves or bats or anything like that, but they're not a lifestyle company like those other companies I mentioned, Adidas and Nike and Under Armour. And it's unusual that baseball has stuck with Majestic all this time. And Todd, you may have some insights into this, but I asked this branding guy, and he said he doesn't see Nike or Under Armour making a play for baseball because those companies, their brand image is basically based on the leveraging of technology for performance. The high-tech fabrics, the lighter fabrics, blah, blah, blah. And you can do a little of that with baseball. We've seen Majestic talk about their dry fit fabrics and blah, blah, blah. But baseball just doesn't lend itself to that sense of individual athleticism. It's not a contact sport. It doesn't have the same one-on-one athleticism that football or basketball have. And the idea of having technology driving the uniform, which is really where Nike and Under Armour are invested in their image, doesn't play so well in baseball. And so this consultant, his opinion was he doesn't think it's worth it for those types of companies to make a play for baseball. Todd, what do you think about that?
If I could butt in for 1 second. The Nike aesthetic in terms of college football is, yes, it's about performance fabrics, but it's also about certain, everything being customized from little inscriptions on the back of the neckline within the jersey to custom typefaces to neon colors, whatever that may be. If Nike decided to go to some franchise, it wouldn't be probably the Mets, it wouldn't be the Yankees, it wouldn't be the Red Sox. Pick some, the San Diego Padres or some franchise in sort of visual flux for years and years, and went to them and said, we want to impart our look upon you. The same way that Nike has imparted the Nike look upon the NFL, even in subtle ways, that may be a very tempting thing if there was some, overall strategy to it. It might be a one-off, right? But it would inevitably influence other franchises.
I would say, too, money talks, and with...
Really?
Really. And with Majestic taking over all of uniform production, and by the way, Majestic has renewed for the next 3 years.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to how long is their current deal?
I talked to them last week. I think they just renewed for 3 more years.
Meaning the coming 15, 16, 17, or 16, 17, 18?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so at least 3 more years of Majestic.
But the fact is that if Majestic gave Major League Baseball some kind of a deal, and it would give them merchandising rights that would drive sales in the stores, you'd see the goofy collars like the NFL uniforms have this year. I mean, they're merchandisers have a lot more leverage, and I think baseball is maybe last to the party, but I don't think it's immune.
Well, only a poorly run franchise that grasps at ephemeral trends would do that kind of thing. And so as Mets fans, we would have nothing to worry about, I'm sure. Let's do another lightning round question. Last year, the Mets introduced a camouflage jersey that was worn. Everybody, just you'll get your chance to voice your opinion. A camouflage jersey that was worn on Military Mondays, as the term was used by the marketing department. That's going to be continued again this season. Again, down the line, is this jersey A, a great idea that looks great, B, a well-intentioned idea that looks awful, or C, bad news all around? Starting with Todd.
B+.
B+.
I kind of liked it a lot better than what they were on Memorial Day, with the lettering only being camo on the white jerseys. They looked terrific.
I think it's I think the intention is there, but I think it's a stupid idea. So I guess I'm a B.
Unoriginal and ugly, C.
Yeah, C, horrible.
Definitely B, because if it's to honor the military, it's a good idea. The fact that it's ugly makes it a B.
But I mean, there was an opportunity that the Mets had that was an organic thing when they wore the service, caps
First
following
responders
9/11,
caps.
which they've allowed the league to bully them out of doing, and they got no, they don't have the cojones to stand up to them and say, we're going to do this. Yet they'll do the same thing because the Padres did it. It makes no sense at all.
All right, in the audience first, who thinks the camouflage jersey is a great idea and looks great? Exactly. No, wait, is that one person? One person over here. Okay, two people. Okay, both rather young. So the youth is with it, with the camouflage. Who thinks it's a well-intentioned idea that looks awful? And who thinks it's a bad idea all around? Okay, even for the Padres.
Even for the
Oh, leave it for the Padres. Okay. One more lightning round question. Assuming Mike Piazza eventually gets into the Hall of Fame, which I think it looks like he will, based on his career statistics and accomplishments and not on just what your emotion, should his Hall of Fame plaque show him wearing a Mets cap or a Dodgers cap? Todd.
I'm not a Mets fan, and he is a Met.
If they're basing it on years of longevity with an organization, it's Mets hands down.
I don't know the stats, but I associate him more with the Dodgers. And I'm from Philadelphia. Forgive me for that.
Man, you're not even going to make it out of here alive. They're going to pick your bones clean.
And I own 35 Mets uniforms, all right?
At the risk of sounding too politically correct, I think a great idea would be to have him with the cap backwards as a catcher.
See, that was going to be my answer, to wear the backwards helmet.
Yeah.
And, yep.
Mets, but we were actually, Todd and I had this quick discussion on Twitter, and it's funny that I never even thought of the blank cap option or a backwards cap. So maybe that's the way, but if he's got to go in with either team, it's got to be the Mets.
I would agree with that.
1,000,000% Mets.
I think I can see where this is going, but who in the room thinks he should be wearing a Mets cap? And who in the room doesn't want to get out alive and says it should be a Dodgers cap? One or two people. Okay.
Iconoclast.
Yeah, Marlins.
And of course, yes, that is what's known as the right-wrong answer, the Marlins, yes.
Padres.
Let's take some questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions? This gentleman here. Could somebody, I don't know if that mic is on, but if so, let's hand it over to him.
I just wanted to thank Paul again. I've been following you since the Voice days when you did that.
Wow, thank
I've
you.
written in.
Thank you.
I won one of your contests, so yeah. But I'm an older guy, and Bill, I have your the DVD. I have to get the newest one. But the one thing that freaks me out, and I talk to Shannon about this all the time, and I look for it on eBay, and I look on sites. The Goodman and Sons company made Mets jerseys in 1980, in 76 and 77, and then they came back in 86. And if you watch tapes, the Mets script looks wacky.
It is.
Okay,
so what I would say, and this kind of goes back to one of the early questions that was brought up. In the pre-computer days, patterns were done with paper. They were done with, tracing paper with holes in it where you dust powder across them. It was all mechanical. There was nothing computer. Today we think nothing of taking an Adobe Illustrator file and mailing it to somebody, email, and it's there in 2 seconds. They didn't have that in those days. Everything was done with lenses, and that's both of those scripts are particularly bad. One's too slanty and one's too fat. But they are definitely different, and something happened on the trip from New York to Los Angeles.
One other thing, if you don't mind, I can add something on the Goodman. When Rawlings was manufacturing the jerseys, basically on all of the years around the Goodman years, Rawlings jerseys were very distinguishable by their tagging. Goodman jerseys had absolutely no specific tagging. And it's very, very difficult to tell the Goodman legitimate jerseys from the non-legitimate.
Before we get to another audience question, I realize I neglected, and it's my fault, I wanted to bring John Springer more into the discussion and say, John, as a Mets numerology expert, what were some of the trends or Mets uniform number happenings of the last season or two? Did anything numbers that don't usually get issued. I noticed that Bill here is wearing a Marlon Byrd jersey with number 6, which of course I know because of you is the most issued number in Mets history.
Yeah, 6 remains the most issued jersey in team history, followed by 29, which got more popular last year as a result of Ike Davis and Eric Campbell. Ike Davis's departure, Eric Campbell's arrival.
Right.
A couple things I did prepare. One of the benefits of having kind of donated my data to the Ultimate Mets database was the idea that you can kind of align the stats and the numbers together. So individually, Lukas Duda needs another 30 home run season to catch Carlos Delgado, who is the most home runs ever hit by number 21. Daniel Murphy is only 10 RBIs away from catching John Milner at 28. Jacob deGrom needs 2 hits to become the all-time leading number 48 hitter. Can anybody name number 48's all-time leading hitter at this time? Most hits.
Get that opening day.
Pete Shurek. Yeah. Numbers themselves. Number 5, as a result of David Wright, is rapidly been kind of gaining on all of the all-time categories. 3 hits will pass number 7, which looks pretty likely this year because number 7 at this time belongs to Bob Guerin, who's not going to accumulate any. And finally, I wrote a little bit about this on my blog yesterday, a rare blog post, but when you asked me, are there, some trends, I happen to notice that since 2010 and the arrival of Kevin Kierst, and I'd be interested to hear Russ's take on this, we've seen more new numbers introduced into the sort of the family of numbers used almost since 1962 when they introduced their first 34 numbers.
So instead of recycling the same old numbers?
Right. We've seen, for example, since 2010, the first 68, 70, 71, 66, 63, 77, and in addition to those...
And these are all for game use, not just spring training.
Right. Player in-game uniforms issued to players, not coaches. And then also issues to 73, 61, 58, and 0, which are all been issued fewer than 4 times. So I think it's kind of interesting. I thought for a while that maybe this was a Kevin Kierst thing. Kind of looking at it closely, I think it's really reflecting the organization kind of mirroring the change of relief pitching and kind of giving relief pitchers a numerical designation that's separate from starters, which they really hadn't done in the past.
Russ, can you talk about that?
I can just give you a little insight on some of that, because back when Charlie Samuels was the equipment manager, he would never give out 16 after Doc Gooden until they got Nomo, and Nomo wanted 16 and Charlie didn't want to do it, but he did it. He wouldn't give out Roger McDowell's number because he was good friends with Roger McDowell. And actually, when I was a kid and played ball, I always wore number 44, so he wouldn't give out 44 to anyone. And that's the truth, unless they got someone that requested that number. Yeah, Peyton took it. I was like, how could you give him my number? Yeah, and then he went to 20.
Have you noticed what John was talking about? The
Yeah,
more numbers that we have,
there's much more freedom now.
and new numbers that hadn't been worn
just
before.
Give them whatever. Yeah.
And so when you will, Kevin or whomever tell you do New Jersey with this number, and you're like, who ever heard of this number?
77. Okay. It's not. You don't think of that as a baseball number.
Right. Okay. Question from the audience.
Yeah, this cap is a 1997 Sunday home cap to go along with the snow white jersey.
The ice cream good
man
humor
hat.
cap.
It lasted for around half a season, and then it disappeared around July.
Yes.
Now, what is the story of this cap?
I don't know.
Well, it was worn. That was the. You can maybe
I
not.
remember it. I remember Gilkey modeling it before the season with the snow white jersey.
That is the famous photo of Bernard
I guess
Gilkey.
it took them
You
only
maybe
4
not-
games
don't-
to
let's
realize
not
how
block the view of
ridiculous it
everybody.
looked.
I think
that cap for whatever reason was ridiculed right away. It was as being the good humor cap or the ice cream man cap. It was introduced along with the snow white jersey. It was meant to be worn with the snow white jersey, and it just never caught on. It was nobody really liked it, and it was worn a handful of times, maybe.
White hats really. Go ahead.
I think it was worn a total of 4 times, the
Yeah.
white cap. They still wore the snow whites, obviously, but they went to the blue cap. But wasn't there a thing, and we don't have to talk about this, but with the white cap, it was banned from baseball because it interfered with the hitter's eye for a little while when they were thinking
Oh,
of the
I don't recall that.
The A's and the Washington Senators.
I mean, but other teams were as well. I mean, the Diamondbacks had a cream
for a
cap.
while.
In 1997, the Red Sox actually wore a white cap for a handful of games. The Pirates and the Royals wore gray on the road, so did the Orioles. So there was this, mini movement toward light-colored hats, and it faded. It didn't even fade. It just went away immediately.
But now it's sort of been resurrected in some of the BP caps.
Well, also one of the things is that they're hard to keep clean. I mean, I know that.
Yeah.
And also, back in those days, the Reds wore a white hat. That hat was not made of wool. When these hats were made of wool, it was made of white polyester because it would not be a natural fiber color. It looked a little bit more off-white or beige.
Next question.
Hi, so I'm Nico from MetsPlus.com, and I have kind of two small questions combined in one. So first, what are each of your thoughts on the uniform changes this offseason with the combination of the snow white and the cream pinstripes? And also, if each of you could make one uniform change to the Mets uniform, hypothetically, what would it be?
The first question I think we addressed at the beginning, right, when we talked about all the changes. As far as one change I would make, I would actually put the NY back in the logo where it belongs.
Yes, agreed.
I agree.
Russ?
Do you want to?
Nope.
One thing I sort of got the answer in just talking to people is, if you remember they have the snow white and the pinstripes, they always wore the white pants with the camo and with the royal jersey or the black jersey. Now, how terrible is that going to look? I don't think they're going to wear the white pants again, so they're going to have the camo with the pins and they're going to have the blue with the... I just don't think it'll look as good. So I would go back to wearing the white pants if they have to with those shirts.
So basically, they're going to find a way to make the camo look even worse this year.
Even worse, yes.
Yeah, I'd find a way to honor the military without desecrating the uniform.
I don't mind alternate uniforms as much as some people do, but I think they should be worn occasionally. And if you look at last year's photos, they wore the alternate uniform an awful lot, way too often. I mean, it was their primary road uniform. That's what I would change. I think the road should be gray and home is white.
There was a time around, Todd, you probably remember this, around 2000, 2001, where the Major League Baseball style guide actually listed the black alternate with an asterisk, and the asterisk said preferred jersey, even though it wasn't primary. The primary was like the road gray and the home pinstripes,
right.
But then there was a little asterisk that said the preferred was the black. Like, how can your primary not be your, it just didn't make any sense.
Slippery designation. I don't know what else to attribute it to. Several franchises have done things like that.
Next question.
Did Russ design the Gary Carter patch when he died?
No.
Oh.
But that was really simple. Basically, like what I did with McSherry, Carter was a catcher, so they just took a home plate and put a number 8 in it.
Who did design that? Do you know?
Team.
Just the team just sent you a file.
That was it.
Right.
Hi, I love UNI Watch. I read it every day.
Thank you.
Good taste.
Mr. Met walked in today wearing the Snow White uniform.
Yes, he did.
That's not a question. That's a statement, but it is interesting.
What do you think about that?
I think they probably just haven't. I mean, one thing about Mr. Met, if you go to games and see him, or even watch on TV, they change Mr. Met's uniform, to match what the team is wearing that day, which, frankly, I think is more than some teams' mascots might do.
I have a question for Russ. Why does Mr. Met have iron-on lettering on his uniform?
If it's iron-on the front, I don't know, because I just put the name and numbers on the back.
They were iron-on.
So it'll come to
Not
me.
my department, says Russ.
Maybe because it's just so big.
He must have gotten it at Modell's.
You could have asked Mr. Met, and he'd say.
So I guess Mr. Met hasn't yet gotten his new team issued, or hasn't been told that he can't wear the.
Right.
Or maybe he's already mounting a little. Yeah, it's a throwback. Mr. Met's in a throwback today.
Also, you guys were talking about the Los Mets orange uniforms. They wore orange, I believe, for a batting practice jersey
They did,
once
yeah.
They
before.
did, yeah, early 2000s.
Yep.
What do you guys think about that?
I don't get too worked up about batting practice jerseys in general. I think they're sort of silly. I do remember the day. I mean, I remember exactly where I was opening the the back page of Newsday where the sports section was, and I saw that, and I just thought, oh my God. I mean, it was really loud. But batting practice jerseys in general are where teams experiment, well, many teams, not all of them, experiment with new things or try to do something that, you know, a certain part of the fan base, you know, to say, well, they'll buy anything, and there it is.
It's merchandising. 2003, 2004.
I don't get too worked up about batting practice. I can't take them seriously.
I promise. Last thing, who designed the All-Star logo?
There's a firm in Montclair, New Jersey called Fan Brands, and they generally handle the All-Star Game logo every year. I actually designed the 2014 logo with them, but they did that, and they did a great job.
I like this one.
Awesome.
Questions?
Okay, time for just one or two more, and we're going to have to make way for the retired numbers panel, which is really uniform related, you know, but they're muscling in on our territory here.
My question is, you're talking about the numbers being given out. The one number I noticed that hasn't been given out all that often, and I don't know what the reason is 24. Or do they plan on giving it out?
Okay, in case you couldn't hear it, the question is why has 24 been issued so infrequently? Willie Mays, of course, played the final year and a half of his career with the Mets, and supposedly extracted a promise from the Mets owner at the time, Joan Payson, that the number would not be issued again. It was issued to Kelvin Torve briefly in what year, John?
1990.
1990, and then Ricky Henderson wore it after that.
Yeah, that's right.
I actually am curious what the audience thinks of this. Now, I'm old enough to have seen Willie Mays play for the Mets, and I attended a game where he hit a home run, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I knew what a great player he was, but I also knew he was at the end of his career and that he was a Giant, he was a Met at the very end, but he was in his heart a Giant. Personally, I think it's sort of absurd that the team can't wear 24 because someone at the very end of his career, who playing rather poorly at the end of his career, wore it. Who here thinks that Mets players should be allowed to wear 24? And who thinks it should be held out of circulation for Willie Mays? And who thinks that if it's held, for those who think it should be held out of circulation, who thinks it should be officially retired?
I have
I have to say, I've never understood this notion of it's not retired, but we're just not going to use it. Like either do it or don't do it. I don't get this like Charlie's thing for Doc Gooden, you know.
Yeah. The issue, Paul, with 24 and really, right now with 31 hasn't been issued since Piazza, of course, and very quietly 17 has been taken out of circulation, although there's not a lot of buzz on that yet. Not that I disagree that the Mets should be not issuing 24, but really what the team ought to be doing, they should honor Joan Payson, retire 24 for Joan Payson. And this would be a forward-looking thing for the Mets that would get nice publicity, a team honoring a woman. It would honor their history. The Mets, they didn't think about it yet. I mean, they haven't.
That's actually an awesome answer that I never heard of that before. So, I think we're going to go out on that because we're talking about numbers and retired numbers, and the next panel is about retired numbers. And I'm sorry for the people who didn't get questions, but you can approach us afterward. All right, thank you everybody for coming. Really appreciate it.